Welcome to the Indiana Basketball Weekly Show on the Grilling Truth Sports Network. I'm your host for the Indiana Basketball Weekly Show, Mike Goodpaster. And right now I'd like to welcome in from KentSterling.com. Kent Sterling, how you doing, Kent?
My pleasure, Mike. 6-0. Can't get better than that, can we?
I think it's the first time since, 2012-13?
Yep, that's it. That's what J.D. Campbell says. So, although, my God, if Indiana played these six opponents 100 times each, I would hope that they would wind up 600-0.
I think they would end up 595-5. I think they'd lose a few to Louisiana Tech after a while.
They might. They might just grow so tired of playing against them and that harassing defense we saw in the second half that they would decide, you know what, let's just concede these 5 and marshal our resources to the other 95.
Yeah, and let's start off the first half. Indiana looked really good, jumped out to a big lead.
Yep.
4 Hoosiers ended up reaching double figures in the box score, led by a career-high 21 points from Trace Jackson Davis. Al Durham, 18 points. Devontae Green, 16. Redshirt junior forward Joey Brunk added 12. I think on the bright side, what we saw was, once again, over 70% from the free throw line. But once again, a lack of focus for an entire 40 minutes.
And you mentioned the foul shooting, and the foul shooting was critical. If they don't shoot foul shots well, they could lose that game. Louisiana Tech cut the lead to 10 at one point, just under 10 minutes left in the game. And at that point, if Indiana doesn't hit their foul shots, that thing goes to 6 and then maybe 4. And then all of a sudden, you got a problem. But because Indiana hit its foul shots, everything wound up going okay. That first half, they played about as well as they could play. And then Louisiana Tech, and immediately, and this is what we do, right? Because we don't believe that Louisiana Tech did anything to change the dynamic of the game. We think that it's all Indiana, that Indiana lost its focus, and I think that they did. But Louisiana Tech all of a sudden figured out that they could compete against these guys and needed to compete against Indiana. That's what they did. And they became a big pain in the ass to play against. And all of a sudden, Indiana, instead of being the aggressor and instead of being really, really kind of forcing the action on both ends, all of a sudden, they wound up sort of acquiescing to Louisiana Tech, and that's where the game got goofy.
Yeah, in the first 7 minutes of the second half, IU had 9 turnovers. And basically, Indiana was a team that just stopped moving and started dribbling. And I don't think this team can win that way. That's a concern.
And they can't win that way. And Archie Miller said that in his post-game press conference. When they dribble, they become stagnant, like all basketball teams. And they're just not talented enough to put it on the deck and blow by people, despite what we saw in the first half early in the game when Al Durham kind of got to the rim at will in transition, and everything looked like it was going to be easy. This is a team that's got to function with great discipline from possession to possession. We keep saying it over and over, but that's the way they're going to beat good teams. They were good enough last night to beat Louisiana Tech. If they come into a second half against a team like Florida State and play like they did, they're going to get their ass beat.
Yeah, they're going to get run out of the building against a team that's athletic as a team like Florida State. You can ask Florida about that. The defense, I think, was affected by the lack of offense in the second half also.
And vice versa. And one feeds the other. And that defense last night, all of a sudden, Indiana, when they get that lead, and I think at one point they were up 39-16, all of a sudden they don't think that Louisiana Tech can shoot the basketball, and they're playing off guys, and they're not closing out as quickly as they should again. And all of a sudden it starts raining down threes. And, if you're up 15 in a game and you think you got it salted away, it only takes 4 defensive stops and 5 threes on the other end to tie the thing. And so you've got to continue to play with that level of tenacity. And Indiana really didn't last night. And we keep talking about Devontae Green, and I think rightly so. He is kind of the poster boy for this level of play. If when they play well, Devontae plays with focus. When they don't play well, it's a turnover fest, and it was a turnover fest in the second half last night for Devontae. 15 first-half points, 1 second-half point, 4 turnovers overall, 3 of them in the second half.
Yeah, and the thing that was concerning to me was how easily Louisiana Tech was able to get to the rim. I think they had
Yeah.
36 points in the paint. Um, when you look at them, they were scoring quickly in the shot clock too. IU did nothing in the second half to really slow them down offensively.
And they've got to understand that this is kind of the critical thing. This is the point of differentiation that's going to be most meaningful as they play against good teams. They're just not talented enough. They're way more talented than Louisiana Tech or Troy or Western Illinois or North Alabama or any of the other opponents that they brought into Simon Scott Assembly Hall. Way more talented than they are. But that's not enough. And you've got to use these games to develop the core habits that are going to drive you to success against really good teams. You can't just show up, and you can't allow yourself to win these games in a way that is undisciplined, because then that's a wasted opportunity to become a better basketball team. And Indiana's better than that, and they need to be more disciplined than that, or they're going to get to the Big Ten and they're going to go through a stretch where they lose 4 in a row. And if that happens, you know what? They could be on the outside looking in when it comes to March Madness again.
But a game like this, this is the first time the competition has been at least close to what Indiana is going to face. So I would give a little bit of caveat here where you played 5 really bad teams. Now you played a good team, and maybe those first 20 minutes put you in a comfort zone of thinking this was going to be like those first 5 games. And Louisiana Tech, I think, is a team that is a good basketball team. So I think a lot of this could be maybe Louisiana Tech was a team sleepwalking in the first half and they just woke up in the second half.
Well, you know what? That could very well be. I'm sure it was a combination of the two. Like, Louisiana Tech wasn't as bad as we saw them in the first half, and they're probably not as good as we saw them in the second half. And the inverse is true for Indiana. But Indiana, they have got to develop a consistent toughness, or this could be another long season, and they can't afford another long season. This is year 3, and you can kind of sell this program as a program on the come and a place where Indiana kids, where they want to show up, they want to commit, and they want to help turn this thing around. But if in this season, to me, this is a critical season. If you don't get this thing turned around, if you don't show positive momentum this season, I think you're going to have a tough time sustaining growth if you're Archie Miller, because really what you're going to be able to sell is you're not going to be able to sell so much. It's going to have to be smoke and mirrors and not reality after a third year where they're kind of a 19-win team. I don't think you can have that. They got to figure it out.
No, but I can tell you one thing that's figured out is Trace Jackson Davis does not play like a freshman. I mean, once again, 5 for 9 shooting, 11 for 13 from the free throw line, ended up with 21 points. I think it's safe to say he's going to be a fixture on this team for a little while.
You know, I like him a lot, and he kind of reminds me of Jared Jeffries a little bit. He's kind of that long 6'9" guy who can handle a little bit, who understands the game, is kind of an intellectual on the floor in a good way, who's going to go get rebounds because he understands the angles, who's going to go finish at the rim because he, again, understands the angles and understands how to play the game. And his arc over these 6 games, go back to that Western Illinois game where it looked like college basketball might be a little bit too fast for him, and the guys are a little bit too strong for him, to now. And there has been a significant arc of development for that kid. That many double-doubles this quick. I know they're not playing against great competition, but I think that his level of growth and his level of performance, I think, does kind of extend to playing against better teams. There are going to be some bumps and bruises along the way, but I think he has really become kind of the indispensable guy for the Hoosiers.
Yeah, and I think when you look at it, this is the best competition he's played against, and this was his best game. So I think a lot of what you just said, pans out there. You look at him, he had 11 rebounds, he had a steal, he had the 2 blocked shots with the 21 points. So it seems to me that when the competition is raised, he's playing better.
And we need everybody else to embrace that. And I thought Al Durham did that for a period of time. The 5 turnovers, not great. One of the things that we got to get a healthy Rob Fennessy.
Yeah.
Rob Finney's got to find a way to stay on the floor. He can't go out and get hurt every other game and have this team function as well as it needs to. He's got to find his way on the floor. And that, I think, was a problem last night because I don't think Al Durham is a pure point guard at all. I think Rob's kind of the guy that has to fill that role.
Yeah, Rob is that guy, and you see it with the 18 turnovers, and half of those turnovers came from Durham and Green, who accounted for 9 of them.
Yeah, and that's Indiana cannot turn the ball over and win. And Archie says all of the right things in the post-game press conference, but at some point he's got to start holding people directly accountable for their miscues. And again, we go back to this week after week, but if you've spent any time watching Bob Knight teams for Indiana, when a kid wasn't having his night, the kid came off the floor. And if the kid wasn't playing with focus, the kid sat. And we don't see that with Archie. We don't see the consequence of minutes lost with guys who don't play good, solid, well-disciplined basketball. And I think we got to get there. I think Archie's got to trust his kids that they're going to be able to bounce back from a little bit of adversity, that adversity being, hey, come sit your ass on the bench. The Indiana Pacers are just up the road from Bloomington, and you see a kid like Aaron Holiday, and Holiday got benched for 2 games because he was playing outside the offense and not really D'ing up with any focus. Nate McMillan benched him for those 2 games, and he's come back and been really, really good. There is nothing that motivates these guys like missed opportunities, and I think Archie's got to bring that to bear as a consequence.
Yeah, any concern with Justin Smith and his performance last night?
Justin Smith, he's the best athlete on the floor. And somehow, what do you have, 4 points?
Yeah.
And took a couple of shots. That's just unconscionable. I don't understand that. This kid, he's dynamic enough to be able to create from anywhere on the floor. And defensively, I thought he was okay last night for the most part, but offensively, he kind of goes to sleep. And I don't think Indiana can't afford to have a guy as dynamic as Justin Smith sort of hover about during the game. And really what he's doing is he's making Indiana really easy to defend. And I think that that's what you saw in the second half. You saw a team in Louisiana Tech who was like, okay, we don't really need to get up in this guy's grill because he's taking himself away.
Yeah, and that can happen, and we've seen this through his career where one game will come out and shoot the ball 20 times, and the next time you don't see him do anything.
Yeah, you've got to find a way. You've got to find a way to be productive. You've got to find a way to break down the defense and however they're giving you. If they're giving you open looks, take the open look. If they're giving you some space and you can drive it to the rim, go ahead and do that. He's good enough to do both against a whole lot of different levels of competition. And I think he just decides now and again not to do it. And that, man, this could be a really good team, Mike. And as you look at them and you think, okay, here's what needs to happen. And these guys, because they're 18, 19, 20 years old, they just don't understand the urgency of the moment. They think that moments are going to continue to come and come and come and come, and they don't. And these guys have got to figure that out, that the clock's ticking, and they need to take advantage of these moments because if they don't, they're going to regret it forever.
Well, and I think it's safe to say that it's Archie Miller's job to get them to figure this out.
Yeah, for sure. And I wonder, we always wonder because we just don't know with Indiana. With other programs, you get a bit of a peek behind the curtain. And with Indiana, you absolutely don't. So you don't know what the interaction is with Archie and the assistants and the players and how these guys are motivated and what practices look like and that kind of thing. And all we know is what we see in games. And what I don't see in games that I want to see in games is when a kid screws up through being indifferent. I want to see that kid's ass on the bench. I don't want to see him continue to play and be trusted to turn it around in midstream because it doesn't happen very often.
No, and this is my favorite part of the show. It's where I ask you what you know about the South Dakota State Jackrabbits, Kent.
I'll tell you what. I know absolutely nothing about these people. And not only do I know nothing about them, but I'm going to have no opportunity to learn because this is a game that's going to be on BTN Plus. And
Oh,
while I was
God.
willing to, I was willing to dig into my pocket for that first month of BTN Plus, they stuck this game on BTN Plus just outside the 1 month window that would require Indiana fans to re-up and subscribe to a second month. And I'm not digging $10 deep into my pocket. I'd rather drive down there and sit in the balcony than watch that thing for $10 on BTN Plus. So maybe I'll wind up doing that on Saturday.
Those sneaky bastards.
They are. Jim Delaney, man, I'll tell you what, if your nipples hurt, it's because the Big Ten's pulling on them like hell trying to get all the milk you got out of them.
Yeah, they ain't getting no milk from me, Kent.
That might be one of the oddest and most unpleasant analogies ever used on this show.
I think it is because this show's not that old. San Diego State. I know they beat Rio
South
Grande
Dakota,
Valley.
right? Isn't it?
Yeah, South Dakota State. What did I say?
San Diego.
Oh, whatever. South Dakota State. It'd be better if it was San Diego State. But South Dakota State. South Dakota. I can't even say it. Damn, I sound like the announcers on the Big Ten Plus that you can pay $10 or $15 a month to listen to. They beat Peru State by 28. So right there, you know they're a legit team. They lost to USC 84-66. They do have a common Big Ten opponent, Nebraska, who they lost to 90-73. Another common opponent, they beat North Alabama 78-73, which scares the hell out of me. But then they only lost 71-64 to Arizona, and they were actually leading that game 32-29 at the half. And then they beat Mississippi Valley State. Kent, who is the NFL Pro or NFL Hall of Famer that played at Mississippi Valley State?
Well, the great Jerry Rice.
There you go, but he's not playing in this game, so they didn't have a chance, and they lost by 30. South Dakota State will play Samford tomorrow, like Sanford and Son, not Stanford. So you're looking at, what, a 5-3 team. But they did put up a fight against Arizona, but damn, this schedule's bad, Kent.
You know, I always worry, though, about Summit League teams. Maybe that's because of Fort Wayne. I don't know, but South Dakota State, usually one of the better teams in the Summit, and they play kind of a different brand of basketball. It's a slower brand of basketball with big, thick guys who can kind of get knocky around a little bit. And so I always worry about them, but I'm not too worried about this one. They've got one more game that's kind of a cakewalk against a tomato can, and then you've got to get busy a week from tonight against Florida State. And you better be ready to go then. But Saturday, I think they wind up 7-0, and then the shank of the schedule begins with a little bit of relish, and we'll see what Indiana's got.
Yeah, then it's Florida State, Wisconsin, and Connecticut, and all three of those teams are. I know Florida State's good. They're athletic as always. Connecticut is a good team. They gave Xavier a pretty good run in that Charleston Classic. Then you get Nebraska, which Indiana should handle. Nebraska, I would hope. And then you're against Notre Dame and Arkansas, and then number 5, Maryland. So we're going to find out real quick over the next 30 days exactly where this team stands.
I think the most interesting of the games, just stylistically to me, and because they're going to be on the road, is against Wisconsin. It's sort of their first trip to a hostile environment, and the Kohl Center is always hostile and always a fun place to play if you don't like playing in front of people who don't like you, or if you like playing against people who don't like you. Wisconsin is going to be better this year, and I think we're going to learn a hell of a lot about Indiana as they travel up to Madison.
The one that stands out to me is Florida State. Because of the athleticism, I want to see if Devontae Green and the rest of this team, the Justin Smiths, against athletic teams, can actually play the way they want to play, or whether they get in a run up and down the court, not really taking care of the ball, and just kind of playing like chickens with their heads cut off, which is what they've done in the past.
And the level of coaching at a lot of these places is very, very high. And so with Leonard Hamilton, who is the best-looking 70-year-old in the history of 70-year-olds.
Damn, he's 70? I didn't even realize that.
I think he might be older.
50.
He might be 71.
Yeah.
He is, and a great dude. just an all-time really, really good guy and a really good coach. I'm so glad that Florida State has kind of ridden with Leonard through some ups and downs, and they didn't get hysterical and kick him to the curb, and they let him kind of rebuild that thing back.
Well, he's
You've
the
got
basketball coach, not the football coach there, Kent.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, that is so different down there with football. They tend not to be very patient. Obviously, this season they weren't patient at all with football. With basketball, they tend to be, and I think that that's one of the reasons that a lot of those schools wind up doing pretty well in basketball, because I think continuity is really important. And with Leonard Hamilton, I think it's paid off. And you've got Mike Bray among those teams. Hoiberg is the head coach at Nebraska, Greg Gard from Wisconsin. You've got a lot of really, really good coaches who do their job at a high level. And we'll see then kind of if Archie, what he is as a tactical guy, given relatively similar talent levels, how he goes at these guys. To me, it was always pretty apparent with Tom Crean that Indiana was getting out schemed. With Archie, I've kind of been on the fence, but I think during the month of December, we're going to get a pretty good look at that.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, I think they should end the month of December, I think 12-1.
Boy, that'd be about as good as you could guess, right? That's what Ken Palm's got, too. They've got him losing up in Madison, but the rest of the games, they should be able to beat Florida State at Simon Scott Assembly Hall. They should be able to beat Arkansas there. Notre Dame isn't as good as Notre Dame would like to be with Mike Bray. They're going to play in the Crossroads Classic. They should be able to beat Fred Hoiberg and the Fighting Nebraskas. So if they can get there.
The
right,
Fighting Nebraskas. Where the hell did you pull that out of?
If they can get to just one loss before they play Maryland, and for the rest of that period, they go 10-8, right, for the rest of the regular season. That's going to be, 22 wins? You pick one up in the Big Ten tournament at 23, you're into the NCAA tournament, and that shows the kind of progress that we've got to see, and that I think recruits want to see, and that boosters want to see, and everybody wants to see. 23 wins is a hell of a lot different from 19, and I think they got a good shot at it.
Yeah, but is 10-8 and a 21-8 good enough to get in the tournament with what I think is a much weaker Big Ten this year?
Yeah, I think so.
Because you've got
to put somebody. You got to have 68 teams.
Yeah,
in there.
But you've got a much stronger Pac-12, which instead of 2 or 3 teams going in this year, may have 6 or 7.
Mike, you've been listening to Risley and/or Bill Walton way too much.
Actually, I haven't, but because
I
can't stand Walton.
Up when they're up.
I can't stand Walton, and I know Risley good enough to know that unless we're talking NASCAR or the Kardashians, he doesn't really know. He's just guessing. But I also think this. I think you saw the Big East, which was down last year and only had like 3 or 4 teams get in. I think that could be a 6 or 7 team league or 6 or 7 team bid league also. So
you know what? Sure. The Big East is for real. I saw DePaul play, and they are really, really good. And you used to be able to count on DePaul being kind of a bottom feeder in the Big East that was going to give Butler and the other teams in the Big East 2 wins. But Butler isn't that anymore, and Providence isn't that, and Seton Hall isn't that. They got a bunch of good teams. Last year, the Big East, you had 3 teams tied for 8th, so they were tied for last at the bottom of the conference. And all of them were just 2 games out of 3rd.
Yeah.
That's how deep that conference is.
And those were all good young teams.
Yeah.
But they beat up on each other so much, not many of them got in the tournament. But I think that Villanova may even be the 3rd or 4th best team in that league this year.
Yeah, they really got run out of the gym against Ohio State. I watched that game, and that scared the hell out of me. Of all the games I've watched this season, and I've only seen Michigan State lose, so I don't know what they look like when they look really good and they play well. But Ohio State against Villanova, Ohio State was awesome. And when they got it kicked into gear last night against Kent State, that was a close game. And then all of a sudden, boom, Ohio State hit the gas, and they ran Kent State out of the gym. Well, and Ohio State is really good.
Yeah, and I think this, though, I don't think with Jay Wright as the coach, it wouldn't surprise me if Villanova met Ohio State in the tournament and beat them because I think Jay Wright
Yeah.
is the kind of guy that's going to fix that. Big East wise, Xavier, I've seen him in person. I know they lost the other night by a point or two to Florida, but Florida's really good. And Xavier's not really shooting the ball well yet. I think Xavier wins the Big East. I think Seton Hall is the second best team, but I think the dark horse there is DePaul.
Jalen Coleman Lands went to Cathedral High School here in Indianapolis for a couple of years. Really good kid. He's developed his game. They've got some bigs who can play. Their guard play is awesome. Defensively, they're locked in. Dave Lato's done a really, really good job. Don't sleep on Butler. Butler's been pretty good. And Butler,
good.
They are playing connected, and if they make shots, there isn't anybody they can't beat.
Yeah. The Big East, I don't even know. Is there even a bad team in the league?
No, they're all relatively good. There's no great team in the league, and there's no bad team in the league. It's going to be a bloodbath.
I disagree. I think Xavier can win a national championship, and that's not just because they cover him.
You know what? This is why I like you, Mike. You look at that glass and you see it half full.
No, I don't. I see it, and I see a team that has like three guys that are averaging 20 points a game with a really good coach.
Well, we'll hope for the best. I always root for Xavier because, of course, it's the alma mater of the great Joe Hughes. And Joe's a good family friend that we've loved forever and love his family. So we always root for Xavier. But we'll have to see.
I'll tell you, the worst record in the Big East right now is Georgetown, who's 4-2.
And they're not bad.
No.
And Patrick Ewing's lost weight. He used to look kind of gigantic. But now his suit just sort of hangs off of him. I'm kind of proud he got on a treadmill or something, got himself into some shape. I don't think that's going to bring any victories to the Hoyas, but it's good to see a guy taking his level of fitness a little bit more seriously.
St. John's is 5-2. Chris Mullen left there after last year, didn't he?
Yeah. That you never see that go well.
Well,
the guy, hey, here comes, except for Hoiberg. Right at Iowa State, he wound up doing okay. But other than that, you bring the NBA guy back to coach at his home university, at his alma mater, and it always runs off the rails.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Chris Mullen, watching him coach last year, I covered the first four in Dayton, and it was exactly like watching UCLA with Steve Alford the year before in the first four.
Is that right?
They did absolutely nothing but complain to officials. I mean, Alford 2 years ago, I think they lost to St. Bonaventure, but every TV timeout, he stood there and bitched at officials the entire time. I don't think he ever said anything in a huddle.
Yeah, that doesn't make your players better, does it?
No, and Chris Mullen, I don't even know if he said anything to anybody. He just kind of stood around with his arms folded. I got to meet him before the game, though, and he was a really nice guy. But I'm figuring he's probably not listening to an Indiana basketball show.
I never understand with coaches, and it's true for almost all of them. I used to work with Bob Lovell, who was the head guy with the Horizon League somehow or another. He'd come into my office for a meeting and say, "Yeah, I just got off the phone with Raleigh Massimino," and this is when Massimino was at Cleveland State.
Yeah.
And I said, "Coaches call you for what?" And he goes, "To complain about officials." And I said, "How many of them do you hear from?" And he said, "Each and every one, every week. Every morning, I've got 10 calls from 10 different coaches who all feel like they got screwed."
Because they probably did from all the games I've seen officiated.
Well, they might have, but you know what? Your team doesn't get better with you focused on the officiating instead of their development or instead of their maturity. Like, coach your guys.
Especially
officials
in
are always
basketball.
going to be screwy.
Because, I mean, how many officials do you see, or how many coaches do you see that? Let's see. When did Massimino coach Cleveland State? Was that in the mid-90s?
It had to be almost 15 years ago. I'm guessing it was in the middle of the knots, like 04, 05, something like that.
Who was the coach to beat IU? Was that Kevin Mackey?
Yeah, that was Kevin Mackey, who's now a scout with the Indiana Pacers.
Huh.
Yeah.
I always wondered what happened to him.
With McFadden.
Yeah, Mouse
right?
McFadden.
Yeah, Mouse McFadden.
Eric Mudd, Clinton Ramsey. That was actually a really good team.
Kevin Mackey could coach. Really, really good coach. At that point, he had some things that he had to deal with. but he's come through them, and he's actually a very, very productive scout for the Pacers now.
Well, that's good to hear. But yeah, that was a good team. I think they ended up losing in the Sweet 16 to Navy, like on a buzzer beater by Robinson, didn't they?
Yeah, I think you're right.
And then Navy
I
got
think you're right.
bludgeoned by Duke.
And those were good teams that Indiana had.
Yeah,
You know, that 86 team, that was a season on the brink team. And somehow, some way, if they'd have won that game, or if they'd have won in 88 against Richmond, obviously those tournaments would have been a little bit different. But Indiana, during that stretch, other than 87, kind of found a way to lose.
Who'd Cleveland State beat? Didn't Cleveland State beat like Richmond in the second round in '86? They played somebody that had pulled an upset also, because it was like 11 versus 12 seed, or maybe I think it might have been St. Joseph's.
Is that right? St. Joseph's was always
somebody.
a pain in the ass to play against. I always hated playing against St. Joe's.
Yeah. I always give Risley a hard time and tell him if St. Joe's doesn't beat DePaul.
Yeah, right.
Because really, that entire bracket in 1981, that first weekend got destroyed, because wasn't that when Kentucky lost to UAB also?
Kentucky lost, Wake Forest lost, and DePaul lost, and they were all supposed to come to that regional final in Bloomington. And I had like 6th row tickets right behind the bucket that I thought I was going to make a lot of money with, and I wound up having to sell them, I think, for $65 each.
Yeah, no, wait, did Kentucky lose to UAB then?
I'm not sure who Kentucky lost to. I remember Louisville lost to Arkansas. That was the year that U.S. Reed hit that ball, that half-court shot.
Yeah, because I remember almost everybody in IU side. I still think IU beats them all, because let's face it, Bobby Knight against Ray Meyer would not have been pretty, no matter what the talent level was on each side.
That would have been so sad to watch for Coach Meyer, who is one of the nicest people in the history of human beings. Just a great guy. I used to watch Indiana games with him in the SID's office up in Lincoln Park in Chicago when Damon Bailey played. And he was a really good critic of basketball. He could sit, watch, diagnose. He was a fun guy to watch basketball with. I loved Ray.
So he was a really good coach, because really he gave off he always reminded me of this. I knew he was a hell of a coach, but he was kind of like Bum Phillips in the NFL, where everybody thought he just stood around in his cowboy hat and grinned at everybody. But the guy was actually a brilliant football mind. And Ray Meyer always struck me kind of the same way.
He was, I thought with those teams, like with Aguirre and Terry Cummings, Teddy Grubbs, Bernard Randolph, all those guys, I thought that his talent level, the talent level of the team kind of outpaced his ability to coach that level of talent. I think he was better with suburban Chicago Catholic kids than he was with these guys who were going to have long NBA careers, or could have if they weren't just straight up nuts like Bernard Randolph and Teddy Grubbs were.
Yeah, because he had some loaded teams. Mark Aguirre, Terry Cummins, Skip Dillard, Clyde Bradshaw. And if you look at it, I think in '80 they were a 1 seed and got upset by Rocket Rod Foster in UCLA. And then in '81, of course, they lost that game to St. Joe's. And was it Joe Smith or John Smith? John Smith, wasn't it?
Yep. And Mark Aguirre flung the ball into the river outside the arena.
Hey, it's the only time he made a shot all day.
But Indiana would have run over anybody that they play.
Yeah.
At that point, they were so much better than anybody else. They beat the living hell out of a really good Maryland. Like, you haven't heard this story a million times.
Buck Williams,
but Maryland,
Albert King.
man, yeah, they were great, and Indiana ran them out of the gym.
Yeah, because that was like 99-63, and that was a game that I think Indiana was down like 12-2 right away.
Yeah, right.
And then just
once they got it rolling, they were to me that '81 team for that brief slice of time. That was the perfect basketball team. I didn't see any way they were going to lose to anybody during that about 6-week stretch from maybe Valentine's Day through that title game against North Carolina. They checked every box. They were awesome. As soon as Isaiah and Landon figured it out, they had component pieces like Ted and Randy and those guys, and Tolbert, that Jim Thomas, Risley, all those guys just played at such an extraordinary level and for each other. I think that's like the guys who play for Indiana now. They've never seen that. They don't know how they need to covet it. But if they do covet it and they find a way to get it, there is no better feeling in the world than walking out understanding that you are absolutely better than everybody because you're more disciplined than anybody and you're going to kick somebody in the ass. And there's no better feeling than that. And Indiana's got to covet it.
Yeah, and those LSU and North Carolina teams were real damn good that IU just toyed with, basically.
Yeah, and up by one, down by one at the half, and then they just went off in the second half, and that thing was over.
Well, the LSU game, I think they were down like 10 at the half, weren't they?
Yeah.
And then they just blew them out.
That 87 game against LSU where they're down by 9 with 4:32 left, and Hillman has the 3-point play. And, you got Knight saying after the game, I thought we were in trouble. And then I looked down at the other bench and saw Dale Brown.
Knew we'd be okay then.
Jeez. Knight, for all the loathsome things that he's done, he sure can make us laugh, right?
Well, I'll tell you, my favorite was in '92 when they beat Shaquille O'Neal.
And what a great job Matt Nover did.
Yeah.
In that game. He was just terrific. Another good dude.
Yeah. I love that game, though. And then they blew out Don Haskins. That was a team I thought was going to win it, especially after the way they beat Don McClain in UCLA. And who was the other? Tracy, the other guard for them. Murray. Tracy Murray.
Murray?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
But because they beat them basically, wasn't it, in LA, like 102 to 70 something?
Yeah.
Because I was actually worried about that game.
Yep. And then there came the Duke game.
Yeah.
And Todd Leary almost got it done.
Yeah. Those officials got it done that game.
They did. That was Teddy calling that third foul on Calvert. And what a travesty that was. What a peacock, right? Ted Valentine.
I don't even like Teddy Bridgewater because of Ted Valentine. Anybody named Teddy. I stopped listening to Teddy Pendergrass in 1992. No more Teddy's. Teddy Ruxpin. I threw my Teddy Ruxpin doll out in 1992 when I was 22, so it was time to let it go, though.
Nice.
But all right, Kent, you want to do this again next Monday, and we'll review this upcoming Titanic matchup with South Dakota State, and we will preview the Tuesday night game against Florida State.
Perfect. I'll find a way to watch it somehow or another. But I'm not paying the $10.
I'll just watch the elongated 15-minute highlights you can find on YouTube after the game.
All right, perfect. We'll do that. I'm looking forward to it.
You know what? I'm pretty sure we could go ahead and do that show right now for after the game.
We can complain about Devontae Green and tell everybody that Trace Jackson Davis is going to be a first-team All-Big Ten freshman.
Yeah. And Indiana didn't play the full 40 minutes. They got the 30-point lead. Then they took 10 minutes off. It got cut to 12. And then they pushed it back to 20 to win the game.
And Archie's saying all the right things during the postgame, but we got to see it on the floor.
Yes. So
perfect.
But we won't be able to talk about the competition because Florida State next Tuesday night is all the competition this team can handle right now, I think.
Yeah, and that's going to be an interesting game. I'm looking forward to those finally starting. The preseason will be out of the way. We'll get to regular season stuff and try to figure out what this team is.
All right, Kent. We will be back Monday on the Indiana Basketball Weekly Show. You want to call it 2 o'clock?
Yeah, 2 o'clock. Perfect.
All right, guys. Remember, you can find Kent Sterling where, Kent?
At KentSterling.com, at Kent Sterling Twitter, Kent Sterling Facebook. I wrote a thing about Tom Crean last night. I got tired of Tom Crean again. And so he's like the scab I can't stop picking.
I know.
So
I was going to say, don't
Crean.
you write more about about Tom Crean than Georgia basketball beat writers do.
I just can't stop. I seriously can't stop. Everything he does somehow annoys me. I know him well enough to know I should be annoyed by these things, so I am.
All right, but he did beat Kentucky that one time.
He did, and that was a good thing. In fact, twice. Beat Kentucky, once at Assembly Hall and once in the NCAA tournament. But this B thing, putting B's for positions, it's just so annoying. And so Tom Crean, I can't stop.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up, and we will be back in 10 minutes with the Tom Crean Show, where me and Ken Sterling will have Tom on to discuss the bees. Remember, you can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn. I just found out today something called Deezer, whatever the hell that is, Podcast Addict. So make sure you go on there, subscribe to whatever one you want, rate us, like us. But we'll be back next Monday at 2 o'clock. So for Ken Sterling, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.